Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to be moving on to patterns of inheritance. You'll find this in your textbook on pages 50 to 55. And the questions you'll be doing in class are the check and reflect questions on page 55, questions 1 to 6. Okay, so these are some questions that you should be able to answer after you go through this section. First of all, what's genetics? What are traits? What is the difference between purebred and hybrid? What are dominant and recessive traits? Can I do a Punnett square? So we're going to learn what a Punnett square is, what it's used for, and you should be able to do one, or you have to be able to do one by the end of this section, and you'll learn how to do one in this slideshow presentation. And of course, this is an example problem of what you should be able to do after this PowerPoint. If I cross two individual organisms with the alleles big B crossed with big B, little b, what are the possibilities in the next generation where B is black coat and little b is white coat, for example. Okay, so genetics. Genetics is a field of the biological sciences where scientists study how heritable characteristics are passed on from generation to generation. So how does that happen? What does that do? What's involved in that? So the field of genetics all started off with this guy right here that you see in this picture. He was an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel, and Gregor Mendel cross-pollinated. Okay, so he's going from one plant to another. That's cross-pollination. He cross-pollinated pea plants and observed the color of the peas in the offspring plants. And he discovered that what is inherited in the next generation of pea plants depended on a factor from the female plant and a factor from the male plant. We now know that those factors that Gregor Mendel was talking about, those factors are called alleles, okay, which if you remember from our previous sections, alleles are the different form of a gene. Okay, so if we take a look at this chart here that I found on the internet, that chart comes from YVHS Life Science in a wiki space, and it's just a really nice table that summarizes everything that Mendel did, so I really wanted to use it for you guys to simplify things. And also this picture was taken from a Wikimedia website. So let's look at this table here. So here at the table 1 says that traits compared by Mendel. So these are the traits that Mendel sought. He sought out, that he looked for, and that he saw in the offspring. So the traits go across this row, and the dominant traits and the recessive traits. So I'll discuss what those are. So he looked at the shape of the seeds. He looked at the color of the seeds. He looked at the color of the pods, the shape of the pods, the plant height, the position of the flowers, and the flower color. And he realized that after he did his experiments that there was one trait that was known as the dominant trait and another one as the recessive trait. Now, a dominant trait is simply one that's going to mask the other trait. Okay, so for example, here we have the shape of the seed piece. So here the dominant trait is round, okay, and the recessive trait is wrinkled. So what he observed is that when he crossed males and female plants, if there was a male plant that had, the allele for round, and there was the female, for example, that had an allele for wrinkled, what would happen is that in the offspring, a lot of the times, in the presence of a round allele, that round allele would mask the wrinkled allele, so that the offspring would look round. So if we just look at round versus wrinkled, you could represent those alleles this way. So you could choose a letter R because that makes sense. R is for round, okay? But because we're showing the same gene. It's the same gene, but it's a different allele, and it's a recessive allele. That's, in other words, that allele is not going to be dominant. You can express that allele using the same letter, but the smaller case version of it. So that's little r. So big R is the dominant trait. Okay, so that's passed on from one parent to the offspring, and this recessive trait can be passed on from parent to offspring. And in this case, what would happen is that the dominant allele would mask the presence of the recessive allele, so that this offspring, what it would look like is it would be round. Okay, so it would look round in the offspring. Okay, now if we had something like, let's say the plant inherited little r gene from mom plant, and from the male plant, and little r from the female plant, then what do you think that this guy would look like? It has two recessive alleles, so it would look wrinkled. Okay, and the same traits are same sort of pattern were observed in these other traits: yellow, green pods, full pods, tall plants, flowers at the junction of leaves, and the purple were all dominant traits compared to their recessive trait counterpart. So what are traits? Traits are just characteristics used to describe an individual organism. For example, peas can be yellow, green, smooth, or rough. Okay, just like people can have brown hair, brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, blonde hair, red hair, etc. Those are traits that you use to describe a physical, the physical part of an organism. Okay, so we're going to look at these two definitions: purebred versus hybrid, and dominance versus recessive. So dominance and recessive we talked about on the last slide. So a purebred is offspring that are the result of mating between genetically similar kinds of parents. Okay, and that's the opposite of hybrids. Purebred is just that. Okay, so for example, in that last slide, when we talked about the shape of peas, I gave you these alleles together because remember that alleles can come in pairs here. Okay, big R, little r. Okay, a purebred would have the genetic makeup. So this for example is not purebred. Okay, so that's it's not purebred. But a purebred organism would have, let's say, for round, would have this one, so two dominant traits, or two recessive traits, and those are purebreds. Okay, this genetic how could I say this? The way that I have this written out is known as homozygous, because the alleles are the same. Okay, in a purebred organism. Now, if we take a hybrid, okay, which means that this is an organism that has allele both dominant, so big R, for example, and a non-dominant allele together. So that's heterozygous and a hybrid. Okay, so a hybrid is an offspring that's the result of mating between two genetically different kinds of parents. So homozygous purebreds are the result of mating between genetically similar parents because they both inherit either two dominant alleles or two recessive alleles. And here we have a hybrid as offspring as a result of mating between two genetically different parents. So you have a dominant allele here and a recessive allele here. Just basically to simplify things for yourself, if the letters match, okay, then it's purebred and it's a homozygous, right? If the letters do not match, then it's hybrid and it's heterozygous. Okay, so that's just to kind of keep it simple for you. Okay, so let's back up a little second here and remember that human beings, for example. Okay, so here this was talking about pea plants. Human beings, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, you get one from mom and you get the other from dad. Okay, so if I were to draw two straight lines here just to represent two chromosomes. Okay, one set of chromosomes, oops, sorry, that should not be there. That was my mistake. Okay, let's just scrap that. Okay, so if we have two chromosomes here, we get one chromosome from dad, one from mom. Okay, now if we look at a specific location of a chromosome, let's say if we choose to look at here, at this point here, at this point here, okay, then we have what's called a section. We have a DNA. We're looking at a section of it that's called a gene. Okay, so a different form of a gene would be an allele. So let's say we have an allele for hair color, and we find that brown would be dominant. So we have big B for brown hair. So that allele is located on this gene. Likewise, on the next chromosome, we have the same gene coded, but we might have a different allele, which might be blonde, for example, which would be the recessive gene. So the recessive allele, so that's a little b. Okay, so that's where these letters are kind of coming from. All right, so alleles are coded on genes on the chromosome pairs, just like I showed you here. One from mom, okay, and one from dad. Here we have what would be the dominant allele. Okay, it would be the capital B, big B. For brown hair, for example, what would be recessive? In this example, it would be little b. Okay, it would be blonde. Here in this example, when we go back to the pea plants for a second, right? What's dominant trait? The dominant trait is the round trait. So this would be dominant, and this is dominant here. Okay. What is recessive? Okay, that would be the wrinkled allele, small r. Okay, so now we're ready to determine if we were to, let's say, cross-pollinate, let's say, this plant with this plant, or this plant with this plant, or this plant with this plant. If we were to cross-pollinate, what would we get in the next generation? So that'll take us to the next slide here. Okay, now in your textbook, what they do is they describe it to you like this. Okay, and I have an X through it because I do not think that this is a very visually appealing way to show you inheritance. And the textbook, I'm surprised, does not really show you Punnett squares, which is way easier visually to see it. So I'm going to show you how to do Punnett squares. And I've talked to a few grade 9 teachers, actually, and a few of them in the province. I've had a chance to do that, and a lot of them do not teach it this way. They all use the Punnett squares. So this is a nice picture. It's a good picture. So if you understand it, it's fine. And I'm not knocking this picture anyway. I just don't think it's very easy to see compared to the Punnett square. This picture was taken from eSchool Today. It is a good picture, but it's just not the way that I want to teach it. So I'm going to see here if I could show you, you know, the Punnett square. And basically, that's a Punnett square. It's a square, a grid made up of more squares. So we're going to go ahead and run through some examples here. Okay, so here, this is how you do a Punnett square. Typically, you just have to draw yourself a box, okay, and then draw yourself a grid within that box. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be crossing two different species. Okay, and typically it doesn't really matter, honestly, what goes on this axis and what goes on this axis. Typically speaking, I do believe, if I remember correctly, the male goes here and female goes here, but it really doesn't matter because you're crossing. So what happens is you have chromosomes that are crossing during meiosis, which we learned about in the last section. And you have this crossing over of genes and alleles, and so what's going to happen is let's say we want to take let's try this guy here. Okay, we're going to cross pollinate two homozygous dominant traits. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to choose one allele. We got B. We're going to put B right here. Okay, and we're going to take the next trait on, or sorry, the next allele on the next gene, right, on the same chromosome. Sorry, I made a mistake there. It's on a different chromosome, right? Still the same gene, and we're still going to put that there. So all I did is I put B here, that's it, and then this B goes over there. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. So what do you think goes here, right? Small b. What goes here? Little b. Okay, that's the Punnett square. And now what happens inside the box? So here you have one individual organism with this set of genes, right? These alleles, and you have this organism here with this set of genes and this set of alleles. Okay, so what happens in the box? Well, what happens is you have mating happens in the box. Okay, so that's what happens. So you have inheritance happening. So this is where all the offspring are going to show up. So let's see what the first offspring is going to look like. Okay, we get one allele from dad, which in this case is going to be big B. Okay, we need another pair. We need another allele here. So the next one comes from mom, which is little b. Okay, and that's all you do. Super easy. Okay, you take one from the top, one from the side, you put it in the box. It's super easy. So this would be big B, little b. Okay, then we got big B here. Okay, with little b. All right. Oops, that's just, sorry about that. Oh man. Okay, that's supposed to be like that. Okay, so then we have big B and then little b. Okay, and in this example, okay, what would happen is that every individual in the offspring would be what's called heterozygous, because they all have a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So my question to you is what would this organism look like if B was, let's say, dominant trait for brown hair, and then little b was blonde hair? Okay, so with complete dominance, we have the dominant allele masking the recessive allele. So if B here would mask this guy, would mask this guy, mask this guy, and mask this guy, therefore we would have 100% certainty that our offspring would be brown hair in that example. Okay, so in another example where we have the same kind of deal, now let's take this kind of a cross here, where we have a heterozygous being crossed with another heterozygous. Okay, what would it be? We would have big B, big B, big B, little b, big B, little b, and then we would have little b and little b. Okay, and in this case things are a little bit different in our offspring. Okay, again we do have complete dominance in this example where one allele would mask the other. So we would have 1, 2, 3 out of the 4 total of possible offsprings. Okay, 75%. You have a 75% chance that a baby that would come from this kind of cross between a parent that is heterozygous big B little b and another parent that's heterozygous big B little b for hair color, you would have a 75% chance that the baby would have brown hair. However, you have a 1 out of 4 chance, or a 25% chance, that baby would actually have blonde hair. Okay, because in this situation there is no dominant allele that's masking the recessive alleles, because you have 2 recessive alleles present. Okay, and that's all I want to say about that. Okay, so hopefully this PowerPoint has been useful for you. Hopefully it helps, and we'll go over some questions next class.